All right, hi everybody, and welcome to our virtual town hall decision day on the conversion therapy case at the 11th Circuit. We're just getting started, so we're just going to give it a minute or two for everybody to get logged in and signed on. And while we're waiting for folks to get signed on, and just to remind folks that we will be doing a Q&A. And let me just go up here and share my screen real quick. There's two ways that you'll be able to ask questions. You'll be able to use the chat feature that is on the page for YouTube, or you can also text to 903-600-6328. All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. Again, welcome everyone. My name is Brian Silva. I'm the founder and executive director of NEAT, the National Equality Action Team. I want to thank all of our panelists that are going to be joining us today on the live stream. We're very excited to have them here. Randy Thomas, Judith Glassgold, Shannon Minter, and John Harris Maurer. I also want to thank all of our sponsors and co-sponsors. A reminder, this is open to the media, but it is off the record, so you're welcome to join and watch. At the end, we are going to have a Q&A. Just as a reminder, you can put your questions into the chat, or you can text them to the number. We'll keep popping that up at various times during this. So with that being said, I'm going to have us start off and hand it over to Randy.
Hello there. My name is Randy Thomas, and I thank you so much, Brian, for pulling this panel together and for the opportunity to share my story among such esteemed leaders within our community. I'm 52 years old. I do have a personal conversion therapy survivor story, as well as a former leader within the conversion therapy movement. I'm 52. I was out the first time in the 80s. I was actually forced out of the closet by my parents and thrown out of the house. I lived out of my car for 3 weeks as a 19-year-old, and that was not a very good time in my life. And just because I was out, I wasn't a very healthy person. I had a lot of issues going on. I came from an abusive household, and that really kind of set me up for buying into a toxic strain of religion that I converted to in 1992. In 1992, I lived in Arlington, Texas. I converted to Christianity. I wish that I had run down the street to the largest gay church in the world, but unfortunately I did not. I bought into some toxic theology that stigmatized LGBTQ plus people and went into it hook, line, and sinker. Because I didn't have a very confident sense of self, it was redefined in a way that I now describe as cultish. I was given a system of belief that turned my internalized homophobia into an actual theology. And so I bought into it. I thought that it was the answers that I wanted, but instead it stole over 20 years of my life. I became a small group leader after a year of participating in that group. I became the executive director a few years after that. I started speaking and teaching across the country, which caught the eye of the man who would eventually become the president of Exodus International. At the time, Exodus was the largest religious form of conversion therapy in the world, and I moved to Orlando specifically to join the staff at Exodus International. To fast forward, I've already fast forwarded through so much. To fast forward, my eyes started opening to the danger, the deadliness, and the destructiveness of conversion therapy and its ministerial form, if you will, ex-gay ministry. around 2008. I started deconstructing. We had a bunch of young people on staff, and young people in their way have the way of asking those questions. And we started asking questions among our leadership of, does Exodus really find freedom from, can you change your sexual orientation? And simply asking those questions brought about such divisiveness within our networks. And it began opening my personal eyes. Is this the person that I want to be? The people that I had lionized, that I had protected and promoted, the belief system that I had bought into was not producing a spirit-filled life. It was producing a lot of destruction. And in 2013, I was the vice president of Exodus at the time. We were already facing a huge nonprofit version of a denominational split. There was a lot of arguing going on whether freedom from or change actually happens. And we were already writing a report. I was working on a report for the board of Exodus International to close it down. We had determined that it wasn't just failing, it had become destructive. Unfortunately, at that time, a long-term friend of mine named Michael committed suicide. And he committed suicide because of the same beliefs that I had been living my life with over 20 years. He died of the same toxic theology that shamed him for being a gay man. And that ripped my blinders off. I couldn't hyper-spiritualize it away. All of a sudden, I saw the detriment that it had to who I was as a gay man, to taking my beautiful Michael away. We were good friends for a long time. And the toxic theology that underlies conversion therapy and ex-gay ministry told that beautiful, smart, intelligent, wonderful man that God was punishing him for simply being who he is. And that's what conversion therapy does. It completely toxifies an LGBTQ plus person's life. And people can put a smiley face on it. They can put a professional license behind it. But all in all, what underlies it is religious stigma against LGBTQ plus people. I made it out with only losing 2 decades of my life. That's a high cost, but Michael didn't make it. Michael was in his 40s when he passed away. When young people, think of a 15-year-old who doesn't have the coping skills of a 40-year-old. Imagine what they're going through when they sit in a counselor's office that tells them that their internal homophobia is a gift. No. Conversion therapy should be banned. This decision was wrong. The fight is not over. And to leave with a note of encouragement, I did come back out on January 12th of 2015. I have been with my partner for 4 years. I am a gay man of faith. There is freedom to be who you really are as an LGBTQ plus person. Do not let anyone tell you any differently. This fight is not over. I'm working with the other leaders in Orange County to have our commissioners pass a conversion therapy ban. We're not going to let this decision stop us. It hasn't stopped it. It's still wrong. It's still a fraud. And we're still fighting for truth and for freedom for our young people. Thank you again, Brian, for the opportunity to share my story a little bit. And of course, I'm open to any and all questions.
Great. Thanks so much, Randy. So again, this is not just about policy and law and decisions. This is, real human lives and real folks that are affected. And I think it was important to start with that story. But we want to make sure that everyone is on the same page about what this case was about, how it came to be and what was being argued before we talk about the decision. So I'm going to hand it over to my friend, John Harris over at Equality Florida to give us a real quick recap.
Sure. Well, thanks, Brian, and we appreciate the neat hosting this virtual town hall. And Randy, thank you so much for sharing that personal story. I know that it is hard to do, and we're so appreciative to have you now in the effort to expose the fraud and the harm behind conversion therapy. And that's really what has been at the center of these local protections that were challenged in this court case. Palm Beach County and the city of Boca Raton are 2 of 23 local governments in Florida that have enacted protections against conversion therapy. And these are very focused ordinances that are really prioritizing protecting LGBTQ youth from conversion therapy, because we know that they're some of the most vulnerable and often don't have a say really in being subjected to this form of harm. So in 2017, Palm Beach County and Boca enacted these ordinances, really recognizing the serious threat that conversion therapy poses to children, and citing the numerous studies that you'll hear about a little bit more that really show just the incredible level of harm and danger from this so-called practice. In response, you had 2 therapists who are licensed by the state of Florida that challenged these ordinances. And really, they were in effect suing the local governments so that they could stop enforcement of those ordinances, arguing, among other issues, primarily that the ordinances violated their freedom of speech in terms of the practices and conduct that they were performing in their licensed professional capacity as mental health practitioners and therapists. So you had a full day's argument before the trial court, and ultimately the lower court issued a preliminary finding that supported our arguments. They found that those 2 practitioners failed to demonstrate any substantial likelihood of succeeding on their claims that there was an infringement on the First Amendment rights and a violation of free speech. So that was a great victory there. It was in line with every other case we've seen on conversion therapy, of which there have been a number around the country. But the plaintiffs did appeal that from that trial court up to the 11th Circuit, and that's the decision that came out on Friday, finally, after months and months delay, a split decision 2-1 from the 11th Circuit.
Great, thank you very much for sharing all of that, John Harris. Before we move on to the what the justices said, just for those of us that may have been joining a little bit late, just as a reminder, there will be a Q&A section. You can use the chat feature over to your right, or you can text questions to 903-600-6328. And we did have a little bit of a technical difficulty at the start here, so I do just want to quickly thank our sponsors up here, and then all of the co-sponsors who helped to make tonight possible and invited all of their members to join us. Great. So with that having been said, I'm going to hand it over to Shannon and Judith, who are going to talk about, so what did the justices write? What did they decide, and why did they decide it? What was their reasoning that they gave for this?
Sure. Well, I'm going to kick it off and then turn it over to Judith. I just want to say that I want to thank every single person who's watching this. This is such an important issue for our community, and the issues around conversion therapy. And I think, Randy, your words were so powerful and really healing to hear for me as a transgender person, transgender guy who grew up in a very conservative part of the country. And I never went through conversion therapy. I was afraid my parents were going to send me to conversion therapy, but I did a do-it-yourself version of conversion therapy, and really resonated with a lot of what you said. And it just underscores for me that these issues of family, the negative messages so many of us get from our families, from so many of our faith traditions, and just the society are so deadly and toxic, as you pointed out. And if we can get at these issues, we are really getting at the root of so much damage and discrimination against our community. So I hope every single person watching this will leave tonight and be with us and become actively engaged in this struggle, because it is just right at the heart of the changes that we so desperately still need to make in our society. Anyhow, and I want to stress too that this is a multifaceted movement. This is I've been working on this for 30 years now. The first case I ever had out of law school was to to help a young person who had been sent to conversion therapy to get out of that situation. Started a program at NCLR to try to help other LGBT kids who've been through conversion therapy and abusive treatment in the mental health system. In 2012, California became the first state to pass a statewide law that just told therapists that, hey, you cannot subject minors to conversion therapy. A little after that, we started our kind of officially launched the Born Perfect campaign to end conversion therapy in this country. And then it's just become a huge movement with so many groups getting involved. HRC has been a great partner. The Trevor Project's been a great partner. GLSEN has done wonderful work around this. It's now really taken on a lot of momentum, and I think it's the fastest, the most successful and like kind of fastest growing legislative campaign in our movement in the space of first law passed in 2012, and we're now up to 20 states have passed laws protecting minors from conversion therapy in 85 localities. So it's really going and blowing. All right, so to get to the 11th Circuit decision, this was just a decision by one panel of the 11th Circuit, a 3-judge panel. 2 of the judges are recently appointed by President Trump. It is a terrible, awful decision. But I really want to stress, though, this decision is not final, not by any means. The localities involved still have a number of options. I hope they're going to seek rehearing en banc, which means I don't want to get, sorry, I shouldn't use legal jargon, but they can still ask the entire 11th Circuit to rehear this case, and I hope they do that. There's also the option of when this will go back down to the district court from the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals. There can be a whole trial still. There is no final judgment. This was just the denial of a preliminary, the district court here denied a preliminary request to stop enforcement of the law. The district court said, no, it's valid. The 3-judge panel reversed and said, no, we think it's likely unconstitutional. So we're going to reverse and say that the law has to be stopped from being enforced. But that's a far cry from a final judgment. So just know that you don't have to worry about all these legal details. The main takeaway here, it's not final. Even if it becomes final at some point down the road, it affects 3 states. It affects Florida, Georgia, and Alabama. It does not affect any of the laws anywhere else in the country. And I also want to make sure that people understand, so it's not final. We still have a chance of winning this case. Even if at the end of the day we lose this case, it affects 3 states. Even in the worst case, we lose this case. That does not by any means mean that conversion therapy is therefore then legal in Florida, Georgia, and Alabama. No, it still is completely unlawful. It's still consumer fraud. If you pay money for conversion therapy, it's fraud. It's still malpractice. You could still bring another type of personal injury suit if you've been injured by conversion therapy. And you can always file a professional complaint against any licensed therapist who's engaging in conversion therapy. So the reason we pass these laws is not to make it unlawful. It's already unlawful. It's to put everyone on notice, therapists, families, young people, that this is a bogus, harmful practice that no one should be engaging in. And it creates a kind of automatic penalty. So the laws are very, very helpful. But even if we didn't have them, this stuff would still be completely unlawful. So don't forget that too. Okay, so with all of that, I will say just a word about this really, really dumb decision. It's just a dumb decision. These two, as I noted, judges recently appointed by President Trump, took the position that providing conversion therapy, because it's talk therapy and it literally talking is involved, the therapist uses words to perform the treatment, that therefore it should be treated the same as like the government restricting political speech, that it's a free speech violation, and that therefore that they're going to conclude that it is an unconstitutional restriction on free speech. No, that is completely wrong. Every other court that's ever considered this issue has unequivocally rejected that analysis, because it's not speech in the sense of political speech or voicing an opinion. It's treatment. This is just like governments regulate medical practice, including mental health professionals all the time. That's all that's going on here. This is no different than the government saying you can't prescribe a drug that we know to be ineffective and unsafe. So their free speech analysis is really off the wall. And then I'm going to kick it over to Judith here. The other part of the decision that was so really appalling was the two-judge majority saying, oh, we don't think there's enough evidence of harm here. And I just want to say we're so lucky, Dr. Glasgow, to have you with us tonight. People should be aware, this person you're about to hear from is like the foremost expert on conversion therapy and from the mental health world in this country, and has played an incredibly important role in getting the American Psychological Association to study and examine this issue, which is the lead author on a very important study report on the harms caused by conversion therapy, and has served as an expert witness in a number of cases, and is a very busy, important person. And we really appreciate you being here tonight, Dr. Glasgow, but I'm going to kick it over to you.
So Shannon, you always are lovely to talk to. Thank you for such a great introduction. And thank you all for being on this call, and your engagement with this issue make sure that we're going to have a positive outcome. And I want to, of course, thank Randy for his story, because I think it's sadly too typical of so many people who unfortunately, part of the difficulty growing up LGBTQ in this country and around the world is that we internalize these negative stereotypes, and then at times act them out against ourselves. And it makes us very vulnerable to those who would harm us. But let me turn to the judgment. So the two-judge majority really got it all wrong. And it's really quite disturbing. The science is really clear. Conversion therapy is not effective. There is no evidence ever published anywhere that shows that you can change sexual orientation or gender identity by psychotherapy, whether it's talk, whether it's aversive behavioral techniques, whether it's prayer. There just is not evidence. And it does a real disservice to the science behind psychotherapy, because we really should demand that all psychotherapy be effective. The same way that you wouldn't go to a doctor, you wouldn't take your child to a pediatrician who was not going to help them, whose techniques were ineffective. That person would not be practicing. So one, it's ineffective. And two, yes, the science is clear, it's harmful. Now, we studied, when we did the APA task force, all the studies done before 2009, and found serious harm, such as an increase in depression and anxiety, an increase in suicidal ideation, a loss of faith, and a real trauma to someone's relationship with God, which is a serious harm for those who are faith-oriented, which is a shame, because many people seek conversion therapy because of their faith, but the risk for them is a loss of faith, and that's very disturbing. Since 2009, there have been several studies published, and each of these studies reaffirms our original findings that conversion therapy is not effective and it's harmful. In fact, two studies published this year, 2020, and one from 2018, of young adults who went through conversion therapy find that they sadly experience higher incidence of multiple suicide attempts and suicidal ideation. So you're twice as likely to be suicidal as a young adult if you went through conversion therapy as a child or adolescent. It's appalling. And remember, suicide is fatal. This is a life-threatening intervention and effort. It's potentially life-threatening. So the court really is denigrating denigrating, disparaging the lives of these individuals to allow them, disparaging the lives of patients who go through this, and allowing them to being put at risk of death. I mean, I think Randy talked about his dear friend. I mean, homophobia and discrimination and these negative stereotypes can kill, and they shouldn't be marketed as psychotherapy. And so it's really important that we recognize that the harms are clear, they are life-threatening, and they are extremely serious. And we need to take psychotherapy seriously. There's a strong science behind it if you use appropriate techniques. Now, to build on Shannon's comments about talk therapy, I consider it more a verbal technique because there are a number of different techniques you can use with children, adolescents, and adults. You could use play, you can use behavioral interventions. There are lots of nonverbal techniques because not everyone is verbal. I mean, we have people with autism or people who can't speak, don't speak aloud. So there are a variety of techniques, and words are just one way. And these words are not political expression. They're not random thoughts. They're not musings. They're rigorously evaluated. Some even have scripts or protocols developed to deal with depression or anxiety. And you're really supposed to go through these types of dialogues that are there are a limited number of dialogues you're supposed to use to help someone get over their condition. You know, the words that you use are to advance clear treatment goals. And they're limited by those treatment goals and psychotherapy theories and diagnostic constraints and evidence-based protocols. So they're really very, very different. They're much more like surgery. They're much more, you go through some procedures when you cut someone open, and you go through steps one at a time to do the treatment. And it's very, very clear. And I think a lot of people, especially these judges, don't really understand what psychotherapy is today. They may have an outdated view from, years ago, or really are misinformed. So that's what's, really, really important to remember. And I also want to reiterate what Shannon said, is that these conversion therapy and these related techniques are condemned by all the major professional associations in the United States and around the world. One at a time. The American Medical Association, the American Psychological Association, the American Psychiatric Association, all condemn these for the very reasons that they did rigorous scientific reviews and they found them to be ineffective and harmful. You can seek justice or some sort of consequences for therapists who do these techniques through the licensing boards, through the professional associations, by filing complaints. And you don't have to do it right away. I mean, a lot of licensing boards, most licensing boards don't have statutes of limitation. So that if you receive treatment as a young person and then realize how harmful it was, you can seek redress later. So I think it's really important to remember you're not alone. If a therapist has harmed you in any way, there's steps you can take. And, these laws are great to have on the books as education for parents and families, as well as lay people. But there are other avenues to pursue if you feel like you've been harmed. And I think it's really important, if you know someone who's engaging in this or thinking of this, have them try to find a good referral. There are psychologists, there are social workers who work with faith issues, who help people bring the two together so that they can be harmonious, that they can add to each other. It's not LGBTQ identities versus faith. They can come together, and that's true across all faiths. And in our APA report, the original report, we talked about models that accomplish that. And you can live a faith-driven life and be an LGBTQ person. So that's all I'll say for now. Thank you so much.
And
thanks, Dr. Glassgold. Go ahead, John Harris.
I want to add one other thing. I appreciate all that terrific background from Dr. Glassgold on just how widely debunked conversion therapy has been by every mainstream medical and mental health association. And to Shannon's point earlier as well, this decision is such an outlier from the 11th Circuit. I mean, we've seen the 3rd Circuit and the 9th Circuit uphold protections against conversion therapy, and those cover states like not only Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Delaware, but over to Alaska, Washington, Arizona, Montana, Hawaii. So the incredible harm that we're talking about has been widely recognized, and it's part of what makes this decision so extreme in where this court wound up.
And so, John Harris, one of the questions I think that kind of dovetails off of this is, these states in the 11th Circuit, there are quite a few local bans on conversion therapy. So where do those stand now at this point in the process? And if you want to start off, and just I'll open it up to the whole panel, but those that folks like Equality Florida and Born Perfect and Palm Beach County Human Rights Association have worked so hard to pass these. Where do those stand now?
Sure. Well, as you mentioned, I mean, we're incredibly fortunate at Equality Florida to work with terrific local partners, like you mentioned, like SAVE, national partners like Southern Poverty Law Center as well, to have enacted 23 local protections all across Florida, with some really fierce advocates on the ground. And of course, the first thing that we always hear when we start one of those local campaigns is, does anybody still do this? I mean, people just feel like it is such an anachronism and that this couldn't possibly still be happening in now 2020. But sadly, we know it is. I mean, just last year, there were 4 different conferences around the state about how to perpetuate conversion therapy. So we're proud that Florida has basically a quarter of all of the local protection ordinances throughout the country. And that's done an incredible job of helping boost that public education so that people do understand the risks and harms that we're talking about with conversion therapy and the fact that they do still very much exist. Also, to Shannon's earlier point, this is sort of an intermediate step. This is not the final resolution of the case, which means there's no immediate impact to those 23 local ordinances, thankfully, that folks have put so much effort into ensuring their passage. We've seen terrific local leadership around the state from those lawmakers and policymakers who have heard people's stories and the stories of those directly impacted. Folks like Randy who've come forward and shared really painful stories in some cases about the risks and the long-term harm that we can see from conversion therapy. And so we're glad that those all remain enforceable. They are on the books. And the ruling that we saw on Friday does not undo those ordinances. So it's certainly something that reminds us of how much work we still have to do. And it's hard to see, a judge like Judge Lagoa, who's from Florida, on that 11th Circuit opinion, really discrediting the incredible harm that we see from conversion therapy when we know just how much we've seen that in Florida's own backyard. But we're going to keep working for those local ordinances. We're glad that they remain in effect today, just like they were last Monday. And we're going to keep working to defend them because it's too important to abandon them.
Yeah, it's been amazing to see the work that's been done by Equality Florida and Save Date and other groups in Florida. I mean, Florida's passed more local laws than any other state. It's been just a tremendous effort. And those are all still completely, fully in force, valid, just like they were before this decision. It's not final yet, and I hope it never will be. And I want to say too how important it's been to have people like Randy, survivors like Randy, coming forward and speaking up. That's what's really made the difference, not just in passing these laws, but in, honestly, I mean, Judith, you can speak to this too, but in getting the professional associations to pay attention to this issue and to realize that they do need to address the incredible harm that's been done by this abuse of therapy. I mean, that's been so important. And I want to acknowledge Ryan Kendall. It's one of the very first survivors in the country to come forward and really put himself in the spotlight. He testified back in California, more than a dozen years ago now, in the Prop 8 litigation. He testified against Prop 8 as a conversion therapy survivor, and the decision by Judge Walker striking down Prop 8 mentioned Ryan's testimony, it clearly had a big effect on him. And that was at a time when it was really hard there just weren't a lot of people who felt enough support to come out. It was a really brave thing to do. And I want to also acknowledge Michael Ferguson and the other plaintiffs in the Jonah case that was brought by the Southern Poverty Law Center. That was a very important case. It was really the first time that anyone used a state consumer fraud law to go after conversion therapists. And that was really very brave of the survivors and the plaintiffs in that case to come forward. It was really scary. I mean, they had to go through a whole trial. It was incredibly successful. The jury listened to all the testimony from the plaintiffs, the survivors, about the damage they'd incurred. And they listened to the people who were running the conversion therapy group that was being sued there. And it took the jury less than an hour after listening to days of that testimony to come back and be like, oh yeah, this is pure fraud. This is nothing but fraud. So yeah, this has really been this is an incredible movement. It is an incredible movement that brings together survivors, mental health professionals like Dr. Glasgow and many others, and lawyers and legal advocates and other kinds of advocates, and just community members. I mean, that's really our strength.
Great, thank you. I just want to, again, real quick, share for the folks that are joining and watching. If you do have a question and you are logged into YouTube or able to log into YouTube or your Google account, you can just put that into the chat. We have a few questions there already, and we'll get to them. Otherwise, if not, you can also text your questions to 903-600-6328. Great. So obviously what's happening, one of the positive things we're hearing is that this is not the end of the road for this. Everything that was in force before is still in force today. And we're going to continue with doing this. But that does kind of give us a moment to take a step back from this decision and see how it kind of intersects with or is a part of all of the other conversion therapy work that's going on. There are a couple of other court cases around conversion therapy bans. There's been some success in passing bans in states last year and potentially in the upcoming year. And both at the state, passing at the state level as well as the local level. There's another circuit court case. So I wanted to ask for the folks on here following that, just to take a few minutes. We don't need to dig too deeply into it, but just to give folks kind of an idea of what's happening with conversion therapy bans, outside of this, and so we can kind of see how that plays into this particular decision. We've already talked about this is really an outlier. Nobody's finding this in any other case, but what about some of the stuff that we might be dealing with in the future outside of this particular case?
Shannon, do you want to start on the Fourth Circuit case?
Okay, sure, yeah. Well, there's one other challenge to a state law that's been brought by the same people bringing the Florida lawsuits. That's one thing. It's the same little group of lawyers and conversion therapists, and it's an anti-LGBT legal group. I'm not going to give them free publicity, but an anti-LGBT legal group that represents literally the same individual therapists that run around the country trying to challenge these laws. So that's happened in there's a challenge to Maryland state law. The federal district court, which is like the trial court level that heard their challenge, rejected it, wrote a really powerful, beautiful decision saying, no, this does not violate free speech. This is incredibly harmful. Of course, the state has every right in the world to regulate this practice to protect young people. That decision's up on appeal now before the Fourth Circuit, and I'm optimistic we'll get a good result. John Harris, you want to talk about the other one in Florida?
Sure. We do also have another case pending out of Florida that concerns the ordinance passed by the city of Tampa. That one has gone up on appeal also to the 11th Circuit. It has not been argued before the 11th Circuit yet, but it will be coming up very soon in December for argument. So we're waiting to see the outcome there. But outside of the courts, we've also been pushing at the state level for legislation on protections from conversion therapy. We've seen support grow for that year over year. And I would say even really bipartisan support that's been great to see, because we have lawmakers who have family that have had personal experience with conversion therapy, and across both sides of the aisle, they know the incredible harm that it does. So it's been great to see support building for that. And our hope is to see that legislation again until it passes. We'll be, continuing to push for it in the Capitol because we know how important these protections are. It's terrific to see all these other states that have enacted those protections statewide, so that it doesn't matter, what city or zip code you live in, you shouldn't be subjected to conversion therapy. The Williams Institute has reported that something like 700,000 LGBTQ people have been subjected to the horrors of conversion therapy. And it, again, shouldn't matter where in the state you live. We don't want to see any Floridian or really anybody at all subjected to those harms, and especially not our LGBTQ youth, who we know can be especially susceptible to it. And that sort of family rejection that we see in conversion therapy has such dramatic and sad, profound impacts on LGBTQ youth. They report, well, those LGBTQ youth that are facing that sort of family rejection, nearly 6 times the rates of depression and incredibly elevated risks of suicide attempts, as opposed to those LGBTQ youth that are in supportive homes and coming from supportive families. So I'd certainly also take a minute here to flag that the Trevor Project does terrific work in this space. They have a 24/7 hotline. It's 1-866-488-7386. And they also do chat and text. That's super easy to find if you're somebody facing this and looking for support. I encourage you to Google the Trevor Project to find those resources.
Can I jump in real quick? I just wanted to say that I'm so glad you brought up the Trevor Project, John, because the Trevor Project also has a campaign called the 50 and 50, where they're trying to get conversion therapy bans introduced at all kinds of levels, on the state level, I should say. And they're in touch with all of the local groups in each state. And so I just wanted to encourage, if you're watching this in your local locality, get to know the leaders within your region, get to know what's going on in your state. And like in Orlando, we have an organization called One Orlando Alliance that my organization, Thrive LGBTQ Plus, is a part of. And that's 44 organizations that, once we got on board to try and get a conversion therapy ban in Orange County, we started a petition, and to my delighted surprise, we had 14,000 people sign that petition here in Central Florida to ban conversion therapy in Orange County. So for those who are watching who are not a lawyer or don't have a case to bring or this, that, or the other, don't let that stop you. Get to know the LGBTQ organizations in your area, bring up the topics, see what's being done, what has been done, and join the effort. Second thing that I just want to mention quickly is I know that there are a lot of former leaders from the conversion therapy world as well who are not speaking up. And I hope you're watching, and I hope you'll start speaking up. It's important. It's not about you. It's not about making amends or this, that, or the other. That's your personal stuff. This is about saving lives. So you don't have to be a lawyer. You don't have to bring your own case, but you can speak up and get to know what's going on in your area.
Great, thanks, Randy. We're going to take just a minute to kind of go around and give everybody on the panel a chance to let you know what you can do to stay involved, stay engaged on this particular topic. And then we're going to go to our questions. So the first thing I'm going to do is just remind everybody that these are all of our co-sponsors, and every single one of them you can get involved with in some way. Volunteer, donate. Some of them might do direct conversion therapy work. Some of them might just be supportive of it. But if you're getting involved with a local LGBTQ organization, that is a great step. So I do just want to give them another quick plug, and that's always an easy way to do something. I'll say for us here at NEAT, we do a lot of phone banking campaigns, and some of those are around conversion therapy as well, in passing conversion therapy bans. So you can sign up at theneat.org, and when those opportunities come about, we'll let you know. I'll bounce it over to Shannon real quick, and a colleague of his from Born Perfect, Matthew, who's joining us for this part as well.
Okay, yeah, just really quick. I just wanted to underscore what Randy said. You don't have to be interested in bringing a lawsuit at all to get involved in this issue. I mean, this is really about changing the culture, and the more people speak out and join this movement, the stronger we will be. So we need every single person listening to this tonight. And one point that I forgot to make a while ago is this has been incredibly bipartisan issue. Like, it's one of the few issues in the movement in the country now, honestly, that's bringing together people across the political spectrum. And it's a way that we can, really reach out to people in conservative religious communities and help them understand LGBTQ people and the pain that we go through, and that children in their communities and their families go through when they hear these kinds of messages. So this is like a really powerful opportunity for widespread, lasting cultural change. But let me, I will introduce you to Matt. I work with Matthew Shirka. He runs our Born Perfect campaign. Matthew's a survivor himself, has been super involved in a lot of the legislation and just also the public education. And he can share how to get involved, one of the ways you can get involved in this movement.
Yeah, thank you so much. Wow, this is just really great. I want to thank Randy for his personal story, from one survivor to another. I just also want to add the aspect of former leaders sharing their story, and also just not just sharing their story, because many or all have been conversion therapy survivors themselves. And we had a letter that was produced with Born Perfect and the National Center for Lesbian Rights, where 26 former ex-gay leaders publicly signed a statement that they were supporting to end conversion therapy, supporting this legislation. And it's been one of the most powerful tools we've had, that the very individuals who were proponents of this movement are all now vocally against it. And so Randy, I just wanted to thank you for that as well. Born Perfect as a campaign, we started in 2014. We work with all of the national organizations like HRC and Trevor Project, and working with the statewide groups and local organizations. So if you're interested, you can go to the Born Perfect website to sign up and get news alerts, legislation information, research and litigation. And something we always like to tell people, on a more personal note, if you want to go home to your family or people that you're in touch with, because I know we're not in that much contact right now, but go ahead and share with 3 people in your life about what conversion therapy is, or even anything you learned from this panel. It's really one of the greatest ways that we can create awareness. The more awareness we have, the more impact we can have in this movement. And don't be hesitant to use even the hashtag Born Perfect. We really are trying to create awareness through social impact and all these avenues.
Great, thank you, Matt, and thanks so much for joining us. John Harris, I know Equality Florida does all kinds of amazing work, but especially in this area, if you wanted to take a quick second to tell folks how they can engage through you or any partner organizations you have, or just give folks some resources before we go into the Q&A.
Sure. I think the most important thing is to continue the incredible public education that we've already touched on tonight. We know that conversion therapy is a form of child abuse. It is psychological torture with real consequences. And we have to keep telling those stories. We're so thankful for the survivors who are, in a comfortable and secure place that they can share their stories. And we know there are a lot that cannot share their stories. So it's a duty for us to continue that public education. And like I said, one of the questions we get most often is just, does this even still happen? People don't know that this harm is out there. So we've got to continue that education. If you're interested in engaging, please do reach out to Equality Florida. We've got local campaigns like Randy mentioned. And that support just has to continue, because we know that the fight goes on, and we've got to ensure that there's accountability for this harm that continues to be practiced, unfortunately, not only in Florida, but all over the country and throughout the world. And all of us can help by continuing that push for public education on its harms.
Great, thank you. And just before we jump in on the Q&A, I just wanted to put this up here. This is the Born Perfect website, bornperfect.org/survivors, where if you are a survivor, you can confidentially share your story and reach out for resources. Dr. Glassgold, are there any other resources, or I saw you unmuted, you wanted to add something?
Right. I just want to give a sort of that individuals can make a big difference. I want to reiterate what sort of Matthew and Randy has said. I mean, if you're an ally, a parent, I think about how maybe there are other parents out there who are not in the same place as you and could use your help getting to understand and love their children. You know, getting engaged with PFLAG or other family support mechanisms. A lot of faith-based and progressive faiths have movements now for inclusion. I know of one in Eshel, which is an Orthodox Jewish group in New York City, has a very strong family and parental outreach and family support groups. Think about reaching out to people who need your help on their journey. And that's true too for individuals who maybe never thought about how the struggles of their fellow LGBTQ people of faith and how that journey may be particularly difficult, or especially for those who are from other racial and ethnic groups who are dealing with cultures that are not as, cultural beliefs that they're struggling with. Let's not, let's be as inclusive an LGBTQ movement as possible and reach out as individuals to each other. And even if you haven't gone through conversion therapy, I think the group suggestion of just talking about it and raising awareness, because a lot of people maybe didn't go through the worst case of conversion therapy, but they may have seen an unaffirming or denigrating therapist, or someone who just thought it was a phase or it's a lifestyle. I think that's really important to validate everyone's experience and not shame them for having struggled, and it's hard to come out, especially as a survivor. So it's important to be welcoming and say, yeah, I know how that could have happened to you. Nothing to be ashamed of, so it's really important to model acceptance to everyone.
Great, thank you. For those of you that sent questions, thank you so much. We'll try to get through as many of them as we can. First question from Alan, wondering if you think that additional research on this topic will be helpful for future cases, or was this decision not truly made on the basis of existing research? From what I heard from the panel, it sounds like really this decision was not based on the real research, which is to show how harmful this is. Is that kind of the consensus of the folks on here?
Yes, I think it's important to know that you can't do certain types of research on this problem because no ethical research would provide an ineffective technique that has potential of harm, especially on children and adolescents. We really limit, the government limits the way that research can be done on children because they're so vulnerable. So we can't directly test conversion therapy on children. No legitimate researcher would do it, even though, of course, people are doing it, secretly. So what we have is really adults' accounts of the research, the experiences they had. And we now have 3 really good studies of those accounts that really show that it is both harmful and ineffective and just shouldn't be considered a treatment at all.
Judith, I'm going to jump in because you said something to me before that made a big impression on me, is very powerful, that if we had this much evidence of harm, and not just any old harm, but the most serious harm, the potential of death for any other medical treatment, there would be no hesitation whatsoever about, of course it would be banned without hesitation. There's the one and only reason that there's any question about that in this case is just the persistence of devaluing LGBTQ lives.
Exactly.
Unfortunately, it's just,
Exactly. I mean, think about this COVID vaccine that everybody's excited about. If there was risk of death, just a tiny bit risk of death, those vaccines would have been thrown out. But we denigrate LGBTQ people and we denigrate our minds, our mental health. We're not taking that serious enough. Mental health is as important as physical health, and mental health conditions and substance abuse conditions can be fatal as well.
And I think this also shows why so many people, so many organizations who don't have a problem with harming LGBTQ people push so hard for this to continually talk about, a lifestyle choice and things like that, because when it's a choice, then we can have laws like this, when, as opposed to acknowledging that someone's sexual orientation or gender identity, just like, their race and their gender, are just innate parts of who they are as a person. And the research, kind of by not acknowledging that, it allows some of the opponents of banning conversion therapy to continue to talk about it in these ways. Gary asked a question. Oh,
if I can just put a little bit finer point on the answer to that question. I mean, the dissent has a terrific ruling here, or sorry, dissenting opinion there, that specifically said that the majority opinion disregarded a mountain of rigorous scientific evidence. So I don't think it's an issue of just needing more research here, but this case highlights what's at stake when we see, how many judges the Trump administration has been able to appoint that are partisan or unqualified, and the repercussions that we can see when we have a federal bench that we'll be feeling the effects of for so many years to come.
Good point. Gary asked, is there any kind of database that's tracking these kind of therapists that are agreeing to perform conversion therapy to be able to, I don't know, identify them, shame them, make sure you avoid them, report them? I saw some heads looking like yes.
Yeah, and Shannon, back me up on this. I mean, there's certain obvious ones, like Nicholas Jr. and who's still running a program in the Los Angeles and New York City area. But we've been hesitant to put out a list because we get so many claims and there's defamation issues of different groups, and unless we are actually legally retaining a survivor to represent in some kind of case where they're bringing a complaint against that individual, that's a different scenario versus just publicly putting a list and saying, here's everyone we think is doing conversion therapy, whether they're a licensed professional or religious counselor. Shannon, if you want to add to that, I think.
We're tracking it. We track it. Trevor Project tracks these names. But there's multiple reasons why it wouldn't be a great idea to put out a list. In addition to what Matt's saying, we don't want to give these people free publicity. It's like we don't want to be the ones being like, here's your list of conversion therapists. But they're very slippery. They are some slippery folks, y'all. They constantly changing the name of what they call what they're doing, and they'll be the first ones to say, oh, I'm not doing conversion therapy, I'm doing reorientation therapy or reintegrative therapy, or they have all these buzzwords and jargon that they use. So they're a slippery bunch. I mean, they're unethical. They're exploiting a very vulnerable group of young people and their families. I mean, that's the tragedy here. These, vast majority of families who put their kids through conversion therapy, they have no idea that it's so harmful and that it's ineffective and that it's been unequivocally rejected and condemned by every medical and mental health association in the country, that there's research that it causes suicidality. And it's just a horrifying situation. And like Dr. Glassgold said, I think the most powerful voices we have, in addition to survivors themselves, are parents who put their children through this and then have come to realize it was a terrible mistake. And that's parents like Garrett Conley's mother. Garrett wrote a memoir of his time in conversion therapy called Boy Erased. It was made into a major motion picture. But his mom has been a tremendous advocate. Adam Trimmer worked with Born Perfect, is a survivor in Virginia and was real instrumental in getting Virginia to pass its state law. His mother has been a tremendous spokesperson. And boy, that really has an effect for parents to hear from other parents that they made this terrible mistake. I think has a really big impact.
I'll just add.
So we're just, so sorry, Matthew, we're
Right.
just at about time, and I do, there's two really quick questions I want to try to squeeze in here. The first is, if we know someone who has suffered like Randy or Matthew through conversion therapy, should we encourage them to share their stories somewhere, somehow? Would that be helpful? And if so, where should we send these survivors? So just want to remind folks, we did show the bornperfect.org/survivors as a place to go. But if anybody has another or any other resources, just very quickly, that you would like to add here that folks know are out there for sharing their stories.
Can I jump in real quick?
Yeah, please.
Okay. I know of a couple of groups on Facebook, like the XK Survivors Group, Conversion Therapy Survivors Group. They're confidential groups that are on Facebook that you can reach out to. I would encourage you to talk to other survivors who have spoken publicly first, so that you can get a feel of what to expect, because these type of situations can be very triggering, and we need your voice, but we also need you to be safe and healthy and solid while you're doing that. So if you are interested in sharing your story, thank you. We need your voice. Excuse me, but make sure you're taking care of yourself at the same time. So reach out to Matthew Shirka, the Born Perfect campaign, share your story with that online forum. That could be a great first step. Reach out to me and I'll see if I can find resources in your area or get you connected online. Sorry, we really.
And Randy, you're at thrive.lgbt, correct?
Yes, not
or, sorry,
.com,
thrive.lgbt.
Correct.
Great.
Yeah. So
Okay.
we'll get you squared away.
So our last question is going to be, if somebody is trying to report somebody practicing conversion therapy in Florida, they said they tried to go to the licensing board, but it wasn't helpful. But any suggestions of places where that should and could be reported in Florida or just in general? I think we touched on it a little bit. Where can folks report professional acting unprofessionally like this?
Yeah, come. We're a legal organization. Come to us and we will help you take the appropriate legal action. We're working with several survivors right now to file professional complaints. As Judith said, you can do that often like years after the fact. So we're really trying to put a lot of energy into that and help people who want to go back and do that. So we'd be happy to help anybody that wants to try to take any kind of legal or administrative action. But I do want to underscore what Randy said too. You know, if you're a survivor and you just want to be connected, there's no pressure. You don't have to do anything. You know, just it's fine just to reach out and just get information. And we would never at all pressure anyone to do anything you're not ready to do, and you have no obligation to do a darn thing. You know, we need to be supporting you. So
great, thank you very much. John Harris, did you have something real quick to add?
Very briefly, in addition to NCLR, you can also look on Equality Florida's website, and under our Take Action button, we have a link for reporting discrimination, and this would absolutely fit within that category if you are looking for resources and want to highlight some of those instances.
Great, thank you. I want to thank everybody for attending the virtual town hall tonight. I want to thank all of our panelists, Randy Thomas from Thrive, John Harris Marr from Equality Florida, Shannon Minter from NCLR and Born Perfect, Matthew Shirka from Born Perfect, and Dr. Judith Glassgold. Again, we would not be anywhere without the support of our sponsors and co-sponsors. By doing this together, it allows us to reach many, many more people without having to have 30 different organizations hosting a virtual town hall. Working together makes it easier for all of us. I'm Brian Silva from NEAT. Thank you all so much and have a great night. Okay, the live stream has